Hello my loves, it is time finally. My god, how delayed is this video? We're updating my testing all of my eyeshadow palettes. I had quite a few palettes to get through in this particular video, and look, it took me a long time, not because I had a lot of palettes, because a lot of these are little. There's not like an excessive amount of eyeshadows in them. I think what caught me off guard with this one was I just like really overcolor. Like I'm so over it. And there was a lot here that I just kind of wasn't really inspired to use. One change that I am making, usually before I start a video, or yeah, like the next sort of testing phase, I pick out my palettes and I take photos of them and I mark them to look at the shades that I think I will use, the shades that I know I won't use. And I kind of use that to help me determine whether I should even try and use the palettes or not. I've stopped doing that. I don't feel like I need to do it. I feel like once upon a time it helped me. It helped me when I was starting this project to sort of get my head around the fact that I'm hoping to declutter a good chunk of my eyeshadow collection or eyeshadow palette collection. But now I just like, I'm ready to just honestly throw out like everything and start again. I'm not actually doing that, but that's kind of the mentality that I have now versus when I first started the project. So once upon a time, it was very hard for me. Now it's feeling a lot easier to be quite cutthroat with the palettes. I am still taking photos of the palettes and I'm going to put them up and just mark the shades that I did use in the palette so you guys can see it. That way I don't have to go through and mention every single eyeshadow that I used. I'm going to start with a big one. I'm going to start with Morphe. Oh, by the way, this was K, L, and M palettes. I did make a little boo-boo. Oh, it's somewhere here. I'm not too sure. I've got piles of crap everywhere. I found another Lethal Cosmetics eyeshadow palette when I was pulling out my next group of eyeshadow palettes, which will be Natasha Denona. We'll talk about that in a minute at the end. So I will test out that Lethal palette in a future video. I'm going to pair it with some other products. So let's start with Morphe Jaclyn Hill. Now, I love the color selection in this palette. These are the kinds of shades that I like to wear when I'm wearing color. So purples, yellows, oranges, pinks, reds. And then of course there's a bunch of easy to use nudes in here. Now, I'm not going to get rid of this palette, but I've got feelings. I don't feel like I'm really going to reach for this that often, but I also don't feel like I want to get rid of it because it contains so many of the shades that if I wanted to wear a colorful look, this is probably where I would look first. I certainly have other colorful palettes that bring something special to the table, so I'm not going to get rid of all of my color palettes. After using this palette, I was left mostly with the feeling of I still want to use it, and for me that is a good enough reason to hold on to it. Some of these shades are sensational. Some of them were also kind of shit. There was a purple shade in here. I think it was Not My Journey. Is that? No, hang on. Let me check my notes. It was crazy. Where is it? Oh, it's not a purple. It's this sort of like absolutely divine. Like this red. This went on a little bit patchy on me. I did actually... I kind of put it down to the primer I was using. So I was using the Ulta Beauty matte eye primer, which you guys know it's been in my project pan. I definitely think that some of these shades don't actually sit all that well on that primer. And there's been quite a few days actually where I haven't even bothered putting on a primer. I haven't put on any makeup. I've just sort of done my eyeshadow, you know, do my skincare, do my eyeshadow, and then wander around the house with it and kind of leave it at that. And I've actually found that some of these shades simply sit better and wear better on unprimed but well prepped skin. I do think that some of these like nudie shades become a bit redundant. They're all unique. I'll swatch all of the shimmery nudes together and you guys can see that they are unique, but they're probably not really that necessary. And am I going to reach for this palette for the nudes? No, I won't. I'll definitely be going elsewhere. But if I had this palette on my desk because I had reached for it for a certain reason and I wanted to do a nude look, then, you know, I'm not opposed to doing that. I'm not opposed to using it for the nudes in the palette. But I definitely think for me, where this palette shines is like this section here and a little bit of like mostly this this orange here, which is really quite beautiful. I know it's a Morphe palette and I don't love Morphe. I have no respect for them, to be perfectly honest, and neither do I have any respect for Jaclyn Hill. But I can set aside the people and the brand and just enjoy a palette for what it is. Am I going to find a palette like this elsewhere? No. I feel like if a brand bought this palette out in like, or this sort of color story in like tiny little pans in a much more compact palette, I would buy that and then declutter this. But like, what's the likelihood of that happening? It's not. So I'm going to keep the volume 2 palette from Jaclyn Hill because I really do enjoy the color story. Let's continue on with large palettes. So we'll do the Lethal Cosmetics next. This is a Nightflower palette. I've held on to this for so long because it was sent to me in PR along with the other Lethal palettes that I've only got one other. There's literally like one shade in here that I'm obsessed with, and I'm just gonna swatch it for you now. I am tempted to pop this out of the palette. This is like a gold to pink duochrome. This shade is really stunning too. Maybe if I am gonna, I said I was never gonna pop eyeshadows out of palettes. The thing about this one, and the only reason why I'm like, maybe I should just keep it, is, oh no, I'm dropping everything, is because on, like, they're magnetized pans and you can pop them out. So I'm not gonna lie, like I'm feeling the vibe. Lethal have really beautiful shimmery shades. Like these duochromes and multichromes are very pretty and I do enjoy them. But as a whole, I'm actually going to swatch all of these shimmers just so you can see them. There's a blue that's coming up. This blue is quite nice, but this one is stunning as well. That actually looks magnificent on camera, but I'll never ever wear them. Okay, you guys know I don't really do blue eyeshadow. It doesn't suit me. The rest of the palette is quite dark. I mean, the palette as a whole is quite dark. It's called the Nightflower palette. That's fine. Darker shades I find are some of the most difficult for me to wear in terms of like just eyeshadows in general, but it is a beautiful palette. Now, typically, I would just hold on to this palette because it was sent to me in PR, and like if a brand sends me PR, I like to hold on to it for future reference of shades. Now, I don't expect Lethal to send me PR, and they haven't in quite a while, and that's totally fine. So I don't feel like I have to hold on to this for that reason. I do kind of love those shades though. If I reach for this palette, it's going to be for 2 shades. It's going to be this and it's going to be this very, very rarely. Like this shade is kind of a bit too dark for me. But it's got that absolutely beautiful, like, see how it goes purple to red? It's like, I can't breathe. But I know I'm not going to wear it. It doesn't align with the kind of eyeshadow that I want to wear on a daily basis. So the Lethal Cosmetics Nightflower has to go. Lorac Luxe Diamond Palette. Okay, this one's very hard for me. The thing about this palette is I think that the shimmers are pretty shite, to be perfectly honest. I feel like they're going to swatch well because my hand and my fingers are quite damp. They look pretty enough, and sure, I can apply them with a wet brush. But that's not really where my love lies with this palette anyway. Where it really gets me is the mattes. Like, I just loved the mattes in this palette. The fact that they're like small pans brings me so much joy. There is a lot packed into this little palette. When I can hold 20 eyeshadows in my tiny little hands, I feel like, for me, it's a winner. So I really enjoy the size of the palette and how much it sort of packs in there. I will say these mattes are powdery. I think Lorac has kind of historically been a bit powdery, but I'm okay with that. Like, I just find that they're, you know, easy to wear and use. This sort of reddy brown is sensational. Like, yes please, every day. I'm gonna actually keep this palette for the mattes. Am I going to keep it forever? Probably not. I did have a bit of a hard time with this one because I knew that I didn't want to keep this forever, but when I stopped using it, I didn't want to stop using it. I only stopped using it because I knew I had to move on to something else to continue with this series. And whenever I have a feeling of I want to come back to this, I know it's something that I should keep because it stays in my mind, and if I declutter it, knowing eventually down the track I am going to declutter this, but if I do it too soon, I'm always going to be thinking about that fucking Lorac palette that I felt like I didn't use enough and I still enjoyed. So the Lorac Luxe Diamond palette stays for now, and eventually I'll declutter it. But when I do declutter it, it will be because I know I am done with it. KVD, or it was Kat Von D when it was released. It's the Lolita por Vida. I don't know why she ever went with the Lolita thing. Like, Kendo should have just, it should have been a no. Anyway, when I started using this palette, I'd never used it before. It was brand new and fresh. And fucking hell, I loved it. I love this color story so much. It is yes, yes, yes. Some of these, like, so these shades in the middle, this one here is like, it feels like a cream. You can probably see like how it sort of lifts up. This one is the same, but ever so slightly drier. And this one here is just straight up glitter. Will I use the glitter? Probably not. But, you know, it's fine. Maybe. Probably not. But these ones, oh, these are beautiful. The mattes in this palette are probably, I think the mattes are really what like makes this palette work the best for me, because they are predominantly lighter to mid-toned mattes. And that just works for my eye shape. I've got small eyes, so lighter mattes help to give me like the definition and, you know, the shade and light and all that shit that I need without receding or like making my eyes look too beady. Like what I've got going on today, I don't like it. Like, I already know I'm going to get rid of the palette that this come from. The darkest mattes, which would be Carino, Lolita por Vida, and Juanita. Did I say that right? I hope I said that right. They are still not super dark. Do you know what I'm saying? But for me, they are perfect. There are a couple of satin shades in the palette, which I mean, I'm not really, I don't care too much for the finish of them. I'm running out of space. That's because I'm trying to swatch the whole damn palette. I think they're fine for, you know, just sort of everyday standard wear, nothing super exciting. And, you know, there's I think this one's like a duochrome. It reminds me a bit of like the MAC blue brown sort of pigment, but it's a bit more orangey. And there is a purple in there, which is, you know, a cool tone, sort of little bit, it's got like a bit of a grayish hint to it. I think the palette overall is really pretty. Really, the mattes is where it really stands out for me. And this shade here, this metallic sort of pale lavendery rose shade, just stunning. I love it. I'm really enjoying the palette. I can see myself coming back to this time and time again. Like, nudes are just so easy for me to wear. It's where my heart lies these days. So Vida, Lolita Vida, that one stays. But you'll probably never see it on this channel again because I don't ever want to fucking hear those words come out of my mouth. Let's move on to Kaleidos. So I actually have 3 that I decided to test out. I've got a lot more Kaleidos palettes than this, but I went through them all and I picked out the ones where I was only going to keep them for PR purposes. So if Kaleidos send me more palettes in the future, I have them to refer back to. But there were a few that I wanted, or I thought I wanted to keep in my everyday makeup drawers. And what I was left with was Lunar Lavender, Sashimi City, and this one. Someone did tell me the name of this. I'll find the name of it. I'll put it on screen. Let's actually do this one now. This is the format of Kaleidos's eyeshadow palettes over the last, or over recent years. You get 3 mattes and an absolutely stunning divine shimmer shade. Now the shimmer shades in these palettes are exceptional. I really wish that they would, if they're going to stick with this format, I wish they would do 2 shimmers, 2 mattes. And historically with these, they've kind of been bringing out a lot of like purpley gray tones. This is one where I feel like I would wear it on a fairly regular basis. The darkest shade it's just not my jam. As I've gone through this project, I have really come to respect how I feel about certain colors and how I just think they don't complement me. Like today I'm wearing a very dark brown in my outer corner, and honestly I just don't think it's flattering on me. They don't do me any favors essentially, but the rest of the palette does. These 2 shades are beautiful. This one's gorgeous. It stays obviously, and it's actually staying in my like everyday makeup drawer. When we get into, let's do Lunar Lavender first. I keep these in their boxes. I know that annoys some people, but I just think the packaging on these is really beautiful. I really love these Futurism palettes. I kind of wish that they had stuck with this 6-pan like compact palette vibe. This one is predominantly purple with some browns. So they're the 2 brown shades, and you can see like quite similar to this palette here. Then when we get into the purples, and oh my god, I do love like the matte formula in here is so smooth and wonderful. And these shimmers are gorgeous as well. I really like this palette. It's good for a little pop of color. I enjoy the purples that are in here as well. They're not too dark for me. You've got one that's a bit more muted and kind of pastel-ish without being actually pastel, and then you've got one that's a bit more vibrant. These are like duochromy, multi-chromy shades are stunning as well. And Sashimi City is actually the one that's like easiest for me to wear. This one is right up my alley. If you twisted my arm and said you can only keep one, I would actually keep Sashimi City, probably because it's a bit more nude. And I just find that everything in here is easily wearable for me. I really love the like soft, no, they're not soft and subtle shimmers. They're very sparkly and light reflective, but I love that the color is quite light. I do think that these browns in the palette they're very similar. One is warmer, one is cooler, or one is warmer, one's a bit more neutral, I suppose. But it is a little bit redundant for me. Does that make me not want to keep the palette? Hell no. Yeah, I like these. I kind of wish Kaleidos would go back to doing these. Let's move on to MAC palettes. So I have 2 from the Patrick Starr collections. I've got Overpacked here and I've got Heatstroke. So Heatstroke has a red in it. It's, you know, it's kind of warm, heat, fire inspired. It is a pretty palette. I feel like I have more of a should we call it a sentimental attachment to these than I do an actual like I want to wear it every single day attachment. These were sent by a subscriber who watched Beauty News, and yeah, they come with really fond memories, I suppose. Not just, you know, the fact that they were gifted, so that makes it very special to me, but also just, you know, talking about them with Kat, and it's just, yeah, they're just very special to me. This one, I think, is probably the most wearable color story for me, and I am going to hold on to it, but I would say that I wasn't overly impressed with the mattes when I used them. And the shimmers, or I would say that they're more satins. This red is, the color is sensational. You know I love that. It's like an orange based red, and it's got just a beautiful depth of color to it. So I love it. But I felt like they applied best when they were, or they looked best when they were applied wet. Now, when we look at overpacked, this one is beautiful as well, although the dark shade in here, it's not for me. I've said it a million times, I'm just not really vibing the dark shades. This red is also very stiff and dry. It always has been. So is the dark brown, but I'll swatch them for you. You can see what they look like. I think this particular color story does have a place. Like, that's the red. I know. I think it applies better with a brush than it does with a finger swatch, but you can see it's not looking great. This brown is so dark and rich. It like borders on black for me. But this trio here, although I feel like swatches are not doing it justice, it does look quite nice on the eye. This guy in the crease, this over the lid, a little bit of this in the outer corner. It does look quite pretty. Am I going to wear it all the time? No. I think the thing for me is I'm just not ready to get rid of them. And I think, honestly, even if I did take those eyeshadow palettes out of my like everyday makeup drawer, they would be kept as a sentimental, special makeup item for me. Like, it comes with memories. They both come with very special memories for me. So yeah, I'm not ready to get rid of them. I do see myself still wearing them. I think the heat stroke one would be the one that I would reach for the most, and overpacked I'd reach for in certain situations if I'm going for a certain look. My last two palettes, these are easy. They're from Mecca Max. These are the mini mix eyeshadow palettes. I've got two. I've got Afterparty, which is like a warm nude palette, and then I have Sunset Squad, and I feel like you guys are going to be like, yo, Sunset Squad, that's so up your alley. I didn't even use it, and I opted not to use it because I did not like the formula of these ones, and I figured if the nude formula is not that great, I don't really trust them to do colored formula that well, so I'm not even going to bother. Like, I mean, they seem to swatch all right. They didn't look all that good on the eye. I wasn't overly impressed, and I just thought, you know, there's so much more that I've got going on in this selection of palettes that, you know, are more important to me, essentially. So that is a nice little 6-pan palette. I think there's color redundancy in here. This one up here is a shimmer, and it's very pretty, but the color is very similar to this one, and then it's just like a lighter version. We've got this like sort of whitish gold shade, which is a dime a dozen. You've got a mid-toned matte brown, and then you've got like a dark cool toned brown. I'm just not interested. I will swatch Sunset Squad for you. So this one's a shimmer, then we have a matte followed by another shimmer, and then we have matte, shimmer, matte. Elbow swatch. Looks like I fell over and grazed myself. It's pretty, but again, I just don't think there's really anything going on here that's super impressive. And based on my experience with the formula of these shades up here, I just wasn't sold, and it's not something that I want to keep in my stash because I don't see myself reaching for it. while I do very much prefer this particular color story because it reminds me a little bit of the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Volume 2 palette, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of thought, oh, maybe I can keep this little guy instead of the Morphe one, but based on my experience with the formula, I'm not interested. I'm just not. So I'm getting rid of both of the Mecca palettes. It looks like I'm only getting rid of 3 palettes. I'm getting rid of the Lethal and the 2 Mecca palettes, and the rest of the palettes I am keeping. I would definitely say that I am not wildly impressed with the amount that I am getting rid of, but I feel like I'm being true to myself in what I think I will use again, and also things that I might be a little bit disappointed with if I like declutter them too early. Like I said, the Lorac palette, I know for a fact I don't want to keep that forever, but I'm not done using it just yet. So with those 3 decluttered, it leaves me with 19 decluttered palettes. It's really not that impressive. And I've tested 52 so far. I am going to move on to Natasha Denona next. I only have 5 palettes from Natasha Denona. I have the gold palette, which is on my eyes today, if you didn't guess. Oh, it's the baby gold palette. I also have the mini love palette. I have the Glam Face palette, which is eyeshadows and face product. I'm putting it in because I keep it with my eyeshadow palettes. I've got the I Need a Nude palette, which is this one here. Madeline got me that for my birthday. And I have the bronze palette, which is that one there. So hopefully it won't take me too long to get back to you guys with this one. I know some of you have been waiting for this. I really don't have that many Natasha Denona palettes. I feel like I had more. I do know that I decluttered. There's 2 that I can think of that I decluttered. I can't remember what they're called. I'm pretty sure they're both discontinued now. But anyway, one was Sunset, I think. Or was it Sunrise? No, Sunset, I think. Anyway, doesn't matter. That's what I've got. 5 palettes. So I'll be back as soon as possible with an update on that. And until then, feel free to leave your comments down below about anything that I talked about in this video. I want to say a massive thank you to my channel members, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye.